if she ever sees me for who I really am.
Then what? You think I would leave?
Yes, absolutely.
For the first 4 seasons of Dexter, Rita was a huge part of his life. What started as a convenient cover for his double life as a serial killer gradually turned into something real, with Dexter genuinely caring for her and her kids, Aster and Cody. Tragically, before her shocking death at the hands of the Trinity Killer, Rita never knew the truth about Dexter's dark passenger, or the secret life that he was leading as a killer. But what if she found out? In this video, I'll explore whether Rita would have accepted or rejected Dexter if she ever discovered the truth. I'll examine both sides of the argument, considering the possibilities, before reaching a final conclusion on what she likely would have done. First, let's take a look at the evidence that Rita could have accepted Dexter and his life as a serial killer. In order to do that, we need to understand their family dynamic a little better. Before Dexter came into their lives, Rita and her children lived under the shadow of abuse. Her ex-husband, Paul Bennett, was a violent drug addict who terrorized their home, physically abusing Rita and manipulating her to maintain control. Even after their divorce, this presence loomed over her life, keeping her trapped in fear. Even though Rita escaped Paul and protected the kids, his absence left a void, not just as her partner, but for Aster and Cody, who no longer had a father figure. Dexter filled that void, offering stability and support. He was kind, funny, and patient, everything Paul wasn't. Rita, still healing from her past trauma, found comfort in his emotional detachment, mistaking it for stability and consistency. For the kids, Dexter became a source of security and warmth, even if his affection was, at times, performative.
Hi, Dexter.
May I say that you look lovely this evening?
Okay.
Master Cody, handsome as ever. High five.
Over time, his presence transformed from that of a boyfriend to a true father figure, particularly for Cody, who saw Dexter as his dad. By the end of season 4, Dexter had become the steady, caring presence Rita had always wanted. After years of living in fear with Paul, she finally built a life that felt safe, predictable, and secure. And Dexter was at the heart of that stability. He was dependable, consistent, and most importantly, nothing like Paul. That security wasn't just for her, but for the kids too. Aster and Cody had come to see Dexter as their father, and he filled that role without the violence, manipulation, or chaos that they had once known. If Rita discovered Dexter's secret, that stability wouldn't just vanish overnight. She would have already overlooked the odd inconsistencies in his behavior because, on the surface, he was everything she wanted. Reliable, calm, and always there for the family. Unlike Paul, who brought fear and chaos into their home, Dexter brought order and security. He made her feel safe, even if that safety was built on a horrifying truth. He was a serial killer. Walking away wouldn't be easy. Rita had fought too hard to escape her unstable past, and she wouldn't want to throw her family back into uncertainty. The life she had built with Dexter felt real to her, even if part of it was a lie. If accepting that truth meant keeping that security intact for herself and the kids, she might have chosen to live with the fact that the man she loved was a killer. On its own, this might not seem like the strongest reason, but once we explore the other factors, it becomes clear that the idea of Rita accepting Dexter and staying with him isn't actually all that far-fetched. The second reason Rita might have stayed is her deep empathy and capacity for forgiveness. She truly tried to understand people in her life, even when they were flawed. While I found her pretty annoying at times, at her core, she was a loving, empathetic person who always looked for the good in others. Throughout the series, Rita's empathy allowed her to forgive, even when Dexter made serious mistakes. A key example is how she handled his involvement with Paul. When Paul came back into Rita's life in season 1 episode 6, he was partly good, but mostly bad, and Dexter recognized this and didn't like it. One night, while Dexter was in the kitchen, Paul started antagonizing him, trying to assert dominance and get under his skin.
My heart beats for those 2 kids. So if you or that skinny bitch try to screw with what's mine, I swear to God, I don't care who I have to hurt.
Overcome with anger and a need to protect Rita, Dexter knocked Paul unconscious and seized the chance to remove him from their lives for good. Rather than simply leaving Paul incapacitated, Dexter took things a step further. He dragged Paul to a motel, injected him with heroin, and staged the scene to make it look like he had relapsed. Then, he called the police, ensuring Paul would be arrested and sent back to prison under the Florida's 3 strikes law. It was a calculated and ruthless move that protected Rita and the kids. But Paul wasn't fooled. He knew Dexter had set him up, and even from behind bars, he fought to prove it. Over time, he managed to plant a seed of doubt in Rita's mind, convincing her to search for evidence. When she eventually found Paul's missing shoe outside her house, exactly where he claimed Dexter had knocked him out, she was forced to confront the truth.
Look, if there is anything left between us, you will answer me this one question and you will tell me the truth. Are you an addict?
When Rita questioned Dexter, she wasn't just shocked by what he'd done, but by how effortlessly he'd done it. The cunning, the violence, the cold precision, it didn't align with the man that she thought she knew. And yet, when Dexter lied and claimed that he was a recovering drug addict to explain his actions, Rita chose to believe him. Instead of dwelling on the disturbing implications of what he had done to Paul, she accepted the lie, forgave him, and looked to help him recover. This is important as Rita seemed surprisingly unbothered by the extreme lengths Dexter went in order to get Paul sent back to prison. Rita's kindness and forgiving nature made her more willing to overlook the red flags. She barely questioned the violence and manipulation involved, and when Dexter claimed to be a recovering addict, she accepted it without much resistance. This was just as much about forgiveness as it was about holding on to the stability he provided. Again, she had fought too hard to escape her past and didn't want to throw her family back into uncertainty. She also didn't want to shatter the kid's image of him, and on some level, she may have even been drawn to the fact that Dexter was willing to go to such lengths to protect their family, something that Paul never did. It's also important to consider Rita's reaction to Paul's death. Despite everything he had done, his abuse, manipulation, and the fear that he brought into their home, she still felt genuinely upset, guilty, and emotional when he died. If she can find empathy for someone as harmful as Paul, it's not unreasonable to think that she could empathize with Dexter. Because unlike Paul, Dexter was not abusive, he cared for her and the kids, and even though he was a killer, he provided the love and stability her family had never known before. If Rita ever found out that Dexter was a serial killer, the same pattern of justification could come into play. Just as she forgave him for what he did to Paul and accepted the supposed drug addiction, she might find a way to empathize with the situation. After all, Dexter wasn't just any killer. He only targeted the bad people. He provided security, stability, and a loving home for her and the kids. In her eyes, that might be enough to at least consider looking past the truth rather than destroying the life they had built. That alone might have been enough for her to rationalize his darkness rather than turn away from him completely. Similarly, in season 2, Rita forgave Dexter for cheating with Lila. Despite the betrayal, she still saw him as a good man and chose to move past it. Beyond her own feelings, she considered Aster and Cody, not wanting them to lose another father figure. Instead of letting his actions break their family apart, she justified forgiving him and allowed them to move forward. Rita had a pattern of protecting Dexter's image, especially for the sake of the children. If she was willing to look past infidelity and significant violence, is it really that far-fetched to think that she might also overlook a deeper, darker secret? And this seemed even more believable when you consider the Code of Harry. At its core, the code dictated that Dexter only killed those who deserved it. Murderers, abusers, and criminals who had evaded justice. While Rita wasn't a violent person herself, there was evidence to suggest that she wasn't entirely opposed to violence when it served a purpose, particularly when it came to protecting her family. When Dexter framed Paul to remove him from their lives, Rita didn't question the methods. She accepted the outcome, seeing his removal as justice, even without knowing the full extent of what Dexter had done. Similarly, in season 4, when Dexter punched Elliot for kissing her, she barely reacted, showing that she wasn't fundamentally opposed to violent retaliation when it felt justified. Rita wasn't confrontational, but when it came to protecting her family, she never objected to force being used as a means of defense. If Dexter had ever revealed the full truth, she might have rationalized it, especially if he framed it as protecting the innocent. A key example is Nathan Martin, the predator Dexter killed after realizing that he was targeting Aster. If Rita had known Dexter's actions directly spared their daughter from lifelong trauma, would she have condemned him or felt relief? Given her history of forgiveness and prioritizing stability, she might not have turned against him immediately. Instead, she could have justified his actions and the Code of Harry, overlooking the killing and staying with Dexter. It's not unreasonable to suggest this. She had overlooked Dexter's odd behavior before. If she ever found out the truth, it might not have been too difficult for her to turn a blind eye again. For instance, when Cody got into a fight at school with a kid who claimed Dexter had left the camping trip in the middle of the night, Rita didn't question it. In reality, Dexter had snugged Jonathan Farrow. She didn't question him. When Dexter was absent from Thanksgiving dinner, she didn't question him. She accepted his explanations without much resistance. A few isolated incidents might not have raised suspicion, But with Dexter, this was a reoccurring pattern, one that Rita consistently ignored. Whether consciously or not, Rita seemed to be in denial about Dexter's true nature. After enduring an abusive marriage with Paul and a troubled relationship history before him, she might have ignored any suspicions out of fear of making another mistake, breaking up her family again, and putting her kids through more turmoil. If she were ever to discover Dexter's secret, there's a strong possibility that her first instinct wouldn't be to turn him in or leave him, but to rationalize it, much like she has done in the past. She might convince herself that Dexter's killings served a purpose, that he was still a loving husband and father, and that keeping the family together was more important than confronting the dark truth of being a killer. Rita deeply loved Dexter and valued the stability he provided for her children, especially after enduring the abuse of her ex-husband, Paul Bennett. From the beginning, Dexter was a caring, playful figure in their lives, offering a stark contrast to the chaos that Paul had caused. Rita's capacity for forgiveness was evident when she overlooked Dexter's brutal takedown of Paul, choosing instead to focus on the safety and security he brought to their family. She also forgave him for severe betrayals, like when he cheated with Lila, primarily because she didn't want to take away a father figure from her children again. Throughout the relationship, she remained in denial about Dexter's odd behavior, never questioning his frequent disappearances or suspicious actions, likely because she didn't want to confront the possibility of having chosen another dangerous man. Additionally, Rita demonstrated an understanding of justified violence. She accepted Dexter's aggression towards Paul, barely reacted when he punched Elliot for kissing her, and would have likely sympathized with his actions against predators like Nathan Martin. While it's uncertain whether she would have fully accepted Dexter's secret, her love for him, her desire to protect her family's stability, and her history of rationalizing his behavior suggests that she might have, at the very least, tried to overlook it as a means of preserving the life they had built together. Rita genuinely cared about Dexter, and learning about his past only deepened that. Knowing that he had witnessed his mother's brutal murder, spent 2 days trapped in her blood as a child, and later struggled with his dark passenger, she might have felt even more compelled to help him rather than walk away. Especially in the later seasons, it's likely that she would have tried to support and heal him. She wasn't the type to abandon someone she loved, and with her compassionate nature, she might have believed that she could cure his need to kill.
I married you because I want to get to know the real you.
If she did accept him, I think there are two possible scenarios. In one, she might have chosen to turn a blind eye to his activities, pretending they didn't happen as a way to cope with the truth. In the other, she could have taken a more active role, trying to soothe, comfort, and heal him, much like Deborah would later attempt to do. I'm curious about what you guys think. Please do subscribe and comment down below as we dive into the other side of the argument, whether Rita would have rejected Dexter after discovering he was a serial killer. She made it clear in the couple's therapy the two started having that she wanted to do this, so she may take this approach. In my opinion, the case for Rita rejecting Dexter is even stronger, beyond the obvious reason that she thinks killing is wrong. Rita's entire world revolved around her children. Without them, it's hard to imagine she would see much purpose in her life, and because of that, their safety was always her top priority. This is made clear with Paul. She endured years of abuse, but the moment she truly broke free was when she realized the kind of trauma he could inflict on Aster and Cody. She refused to let them suffer through the same pain she had, making it her mission to shield them from anything that could harm them. So if she discovered that Dexter was a serial killer, her first instinct would likely be absolute terror, not just for herself, but for her kids. How could she see the man she loved the same way, knowing he's killed people, and then came home to hold her children with those same hands? The sheer horror of that realization would be enough to shake her to her core and leave Dexter. Previously, I argued that her past relationship with Paul might make her more inclined to stay with Dexter despite his darkness. His stability, kindness, and love could have outweighed the horrifying truth, but it is just as easy to argue the opposite, that her history with Paul would have made her even more likely to leave. Having experienced abuse and violence firsthand, Rita likely has zero tolerance for bad men.
I thought you were different than Paul, but you're the same. Actually, you're worse. You made me trust you.
After enduring Paul's abuse, she wouldn't risk putting herself or her children through that same kind of pain again. Knowing Dexter was a killer would shatter any sense of security she had built, making it impossible for her to justify staying. especially after believing he was a recovering drug addict. She had escaped one destructive relationship and she wouldn't willingly step into another. I think one of the most instrumental pieces of evidence of this video is Rita's stance on the Bay Harbor butcher. When Cody became scared that the infamous killer might come after him, Rita didn't hesitate to voice her disapproval. She openly expressed negative opinions about the butcher, showing that she saw him as a threat rather than some kind of vigilante or necessary evil.
It makes me so angry that there's some monster out there scaring my son.
I gotta go to work.
You know, I hope they catch him today. And I'm not a violent person, but I hope they hurt him.
This reaction suggests that if she ever found out that Dexter was the butcher, her immediate response would be fear and rejection rather than acceptance. This reinforces the idea that even though Rita knew the Bay Harbor butcher only targeted bad people, she still fundamentally opposed what he stood for. Her disagreement was so strong that she even wanted him to suffer for his actions. If Rita ever discovered that Dexter was the Bay Harbor butcher, her first reaction would likely be fear, shock, and immediate rejection, followed by an overwhelming sense of betrayal, and that betrayal is key. Trust was one of the most important aspects of a relationship for Rita. She almost broke up with Dexter when she felt that she couldn't trust him, whether it was over his supposed drug addiction in season 1 or his secrecy about keeping his apartment after their marriage in season 4. Time and time again, when Dexter hid things from her, it shook the foundation of their relationship.
I need a partner, Dexter. Someone I can trust. Unless you can be completely honest with me. I don't want to do this anymore.
But if she found out that he was a serial killer, that would be the ultimate betrayal. It would prove that the man she married, the man she thought she knew, was nothing more than a carefully crafted lie. His entire identity, his kindness, his stability, his love, would suddenly seem like an illusion. And once that trust was broken, there would be no repairing it. And she would be completely justified in feeling that way. I mean, I know I definitely would. She would never be able to trust him again, and without that trust, a relationship would be impossible. Another crucial point is that Rita was willing to break up with Dexter over issues far less severe than being a serial killer. She temporarily ended things when she discovered that he had cheated on her with Lila in season 2, and she also threatened to leave when he hesitated about having a child with her. I can give multiple other examples, but I know some of you will start complaining about me repeating myself, so I'll hold off for now. If she was willing to consider breaking up with Dexter over these things, serious but nowhere near the gravity of murder, it's almost a certainty that discovering that he was a serial killer would have been an immediate deal breaker. Someone who views infidelity or a lack of commitment to fatherhood as relationship-ending betrayals is not someone who would look past cold-blooded killing. Also, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying the video. Finally, it's important to consider the state of their relationship by the end of season 4. By that point, they were already growing somewhat distant. One of the clearest examples was Rita kissing Elliot on Thanksgiving. She instantly regretted it, but the fact that it happened at all spoke volumes about the cracks forming in their marriage.
We have this connection, and it's not just because we're both lonely. It's
No, I'm not lonely. And I have Dexter.
the guy who's never home.
Elliot was absolutely right, and I think Rita knew this. If the relationship was already under strain, the revelation that Dexter was a serial killer would shatter things beyond repair. As a result of the kiss, the two went to couples therapy, where Rita strongly emphasized how much trust meant to their relationship. However, it became clear during those sessions that the relationship was already under strain, particularly from Rita's side. She was beginning to question whether Dexter was truly committed to her and the family, and she wasn't entirely sure if she could fully commit to him either. If Rita didn't feel completely secure in their relationship and wasn't fully convinced of Dexter's love for her, it's highly unlikely that she would have stayed with him after discovering he was a serial killer. Although Dexter and Rita had patched things up by the end of season 4, I'm almost certain that they would have faced the same issues again before long, if not for, well, what happened. Now that I've covered all my points, I want to explore the bigger question. If Rita rejected Dexter's secret life, what would she actually do? I think most likely she would quietly leave, taking the kids with her. One day, Dexter would come home to an empty house. Rita and the children gone, likely have moved out the state to escape him. I find it highly unlikely that Rita would have gone to the police, mainly because she would want to protect the kids' image of their father, as I've discussed before. The kids already had endured enough trauma, and discovering their stepfather was a serial killer would be absolutely devastating. Rita, always putting them first, would likely do everything in her power to shield them from the truth and keep them safe. Additionally, her past experiences with law enforcement weren't exactly positive. When she tried to report Paul for attacking her, he managed to manipulate the situation and nearly cost her custody of the kids. She knew firsthand how flawed the system could be, and likely wouldn't trust the police to handle the situation properly. Instead, to ensure her safety and the safety of her children, she would do what she did best: leave quietly and start over somewhere new. Now, whether Rita would have accepted Dexter or not largely depends on when she found out. In the early seasons, Rita was more timid, unsure of herself, and heavily reliant on Dexter. As a survivor of domestic abuse, she was vulnerable and, in some ways, desperate for stability. At this stage, the relationship wasn't as deep, which makes the argument go both ways. On one hand, you could argue that she might have accepted Dexter because she was more easily influenced and needed security. On the other hand, she wasn't as emotionally attached to him yet, which could have made her more likely to walk away, prioritizing her children's safety over staying in another dangerous relationship. By the end of season 4, however, Rita had grown into a more confident, independent woman with a stronger sense of self. She had settled into her suburban life, built a solid support system, and was no longer the vulnerable person she once was. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.